Hey guys, my name's Jordan. I'm one of the guys who did the Kawaii video that I just released a few days ago. If you haven't checked that out yet, there should be a link on the screen right now. But this will be basically a brief demonstration of how I color corrected a lot of my shots from that video and some of the dynamic range adjustments I did for that. Also actually start out by talking about the software and the system that I use, which I will jump right into actually. So, as you can see, I'm editing in Final Cut Pro X. I know this is not industry standard. A lot of people use Premiere and Avid, especially for movies. I've used both of those, and I wouldn't say that editing a video like this is necessary. Also, this is just what I have, so I will use it. And it definitely worked great for this video. And also, I'd rather be spending my money on things like lenses and equipment, which I did spend too much. So I actually am going to jump out of Final Cut and show you guys this first image. This is just an overall good shot to start out with. I'll talk about my settings here. This shot is actually Cinelike V. It is not Vlog. I actually didn't have that at the time I was shooting. Actually, all the shots are in Cine V, and they're all at -5 with everything except for hue. Hue is at 0. And this is the final shot that ended up in the video. And I'll jump right into that. So all of this was done in Final Cut Pro. And then this Mac is a 2012. And nothing super special about this, considering the fact I'm editing in 4K. Basically, if I go to more info here, no crazy graphics card, nothing. I'm just editing in a proxy. It's basically very simple. When you go to import your media in Final Cut Pro, you just select that as a setting. Definitely not ideal for storage. As you can see, this yellow here is probably a lot of whatever the proxy is doing. I really don't know much about that, but I have this external Seagate 2 terabyte hard drive that definitely helps me out. I would not be able to survive without it. So those are my settings. I'm really not going to get in depth with more because they're really not special. I'm just going to jump right into color correction now. I'll run you through this little video and kind of it's very short. But as you can see, these original profiles are just very flat and kind of desaturated. Not as much dynamic range as you would want when you're shooting at sunrise. And there's a blur on the image there and it's shaky, so I stabilized. And this shot's crazy. I did a lot with it. But I will actually go into each individual shot now. The first one more in depth because a lot of the other ones are like it. So let's just jump right into it here. So first I'm going to take off all the color adjustments, everything, just show you step by step what I did. First I did, obviously you can see there's a letterbox here. This is aspect ratio 235:1. And I offset it a little bit just to make sure this is all composed correctly. Actually, with this shot, I like it a lot without the letterbox, but to just make the whole video in general better, because not all the shots are like that, I decided to put a letterbox on it. I just really like that widescreen look. And then I applied 3D LUT, L-U-T, and as you can see, that kind of gives it a bluish look. For a lot of my shots, I took out that blue a little bit, but for this one I didn't. I kind of left it in because I liked it. That's not normally the way to go with color correcting. I'm not an expert, but I just kind of go with what looks good, I guess. So yeah, I got this Osiris LUT package, and it comes with all these fancy stuff. Kodak Rec 709 is what I use for most of my shots. Some of them I used Vision 4, 6, some of those guys for kind of the water shots. But as you can see, it looks a little blue. I put it at 40% because going all the way to 100 is just a little bit too much for me. 40% is a good start since I can then adjust, contrast and all that later. So the first correction I did was basically all of it. I adjusted first the color. I don't adjust exposure yet, so it's still flat before I adjust the color. Daytime shots, I take the midtones towards orange a little bit more, and then put the shadows a little bit up at like 1%, 1 or 2. Don't want to make it look too fake. I know that a rising Hollywood standard right now is just kind of making a lot of shots blue and orange because they're complementary, I think, colors. Yes, something like that. Saturation here is at 5%. Some of the shots get up to 22%, just depending on how saturated the overall image looks. This one was already kind of saturated with the bird and everything, so just put it at 5. Dropped the shadows at -7, -6. Kept the highlights where they were at. So it all just, the shadows look good enough to where they're just dark enough where you still retain a lot of the detail. And then something else here. I noticed that the right side of the image looks less contrasted as the left. So I just kind of compensated for that. I mean, as you can see, now you can kind of see this imaginary box down the middle. You would not notice that unless I pointed it out. If I had to change that, if I had the opportunity to change that beforehand, because I didn't notice it, I would have, but this is basically the feathering. This is very easy. I just went to add mask down here. I did that with a lot of the shots, and I will show you a lot more about that later. But in order, once I set the mask, then I went over to exposure, and literally all I did was just drop the shadows one more, just in this specific area, and that did the job for me. So that was basically it for that shot. Very similar here. I won't go into depth. Letterbox, first step. This highlight was super annoying, very blown out, very distracting, but luckily this guy was moving to, I think it proves just a general aesthetic rule that our eye catches movement more than bright areas. Still, it really annoyed me though. Then I'm going to get into this shot. This shot, as you can see, just first of all, look at this left side. It is so dark. So I will, and as you can see, this is a moving shot, so this isn't super simple as the other ones. I did a lot of the same things with the other static shots, like you saw in the beginning. Here we go. So yes, there's the letterbox. There's the LUT at 40%. Kind of gives it that blue and orange look. What was different about the coloring here is that I will first actually take off all of these just to show you what I did. Correction 1. So the first thing I did, just overall color. I actually, for the sunrise and sunset shots, for the most part, I brought them into the purple range. So only up to 5% for this one. The rest, shadows were the same as 1. Didn't adjust any of the highlights or the global range. So saturation here, I actually boosted up to 15%. The other shot I showed you was at 5. Just depends on what you think looks good. So basically here I thought it was just overall dark, so I brought up the shadows the other way instead of down, brightening them a little bit. Not too much though, and then the mids down a lot, then the brights a little bit. I did not want this to get overexposed. Then a lot more correction went into this, which made it look a lot better. So first I wanted to bring out this reflection a lot more. Definitely too dark. So as you can see, if I click on and off with this, you can definitely see that coming to life. First shape mask here is actually the only mask I did. The other one is just wrong. I added an extra one. So since this is a moving shot, it's still very simple. You just work with keyframes. At the beginning, you set a keyframe right here and adjust exactly where you want it. Feather it out as much as possible. Make it along the horizon. And then you go to the end or whenever it stops moving. This one actually does turn and move a little bit, but this you go to the end and set another keyframe and adjust it. And that's really as simple as it is for that one. What I did is just within that mask to brighten up those reflections, brought up the highlights significantly to 40 and the midtones down a little bit, and nothing else with the saturation or color, since all we needed to do is just brighten up this area without making it look fake. And then correction 3 here, look at what that did on the left side of the frame. I think it just brought to life the entire image, because here it's just too dark. You're just not getting detail. Once again, I'm not shooting in vlog, so when you're shooting like this in the old profiles and you want to get a really good image, it might require some steps like this. So as you can see, it's just another simple mask on the side of the frame. I just really didn't get fancy. I didn't do any motion tracking or any keyframing. I just kind of left it there, and you just cannot tell. Feathered it a lot here so that it faded out the effect, but I basically just within that mask went to exposure, brought up the midtones and the highlights, and took down the shadows. Just again, play with what you think looks good. Okay, next is this shot. Similar thing here. First of all though, this is a moving, I was holding this in my hands with my glide cam, and I wanted it completely static. So believe it or not, yeah, I was holding this. So I wanted to, the first step I did was to stabilize it, and it literally made it as stable as a tripod. Yeah, it's not warp stabilizer, but with handheld stuff, it is literally golden. The second thing that stands out is the blur on this, on the screen here. With wide angle lenses, you definitely see a lot more of this than with telephoto. It just stands out a lot more, which can get annoying. So basically once I stabilized it, then I went into color, and I will take you into what I did there. Don't peek at what I did. Okay, first correction, just overall color. You might say, oh, that looks good enough. You know, after bringing up the shadows and down the midtones, keeping the highlights the same, I wanted to see more detail here all around, and I just wasn't getting that in the first correction. Brought up the saturation significantly to 22%. Color, since this was around sunset, I actually put the midtones more in the purplish red instead of the orange. Shadows were at 1% in the blue. And now the next correction is with the blur, the kind of blue hazy blur that I just don't like, kind of like a water spot on my lens. So this was all done in Final Cut, just a simple mask here. Once you add a mask right here, it'll just go to a default circle on the screen. You can just drag the center over here and then just, you know, adjust accordingly to however you like it. I didn't want to feather it out too much or extend it across a wider range, because really I just needed this area fixed. So what I did there is I just really dropped the shadows a lot, and that was really it. That was the only thing I did, and it took it out completely. Then with color correction 3, I just kind of darken these shadows a little bit just to, sorry, this is what happens when you edit in 4K. It just lags all day. It's not that bad. I did a whole 3.5-minute video with like this, so just trying to multitask and render this while I'm editing, which I don't want it to do. But Final Cut is annoying. Where was I? So yeah, correction 3. This mask, I just went around these clouds, darkened them. I wanted to draw attention more kind of in this range. So what I did next is I was like, you know what, I'm just not seeing enough of, this sand and these rocks. So voila. This mask drawn here, I brought out a lot of the highlights, actually all the way, and a little bit of the mids I drew up, and then to compensate and make sure it still looked realistic and that these shadows weren't too bright, I just brought down the shadows. And you get an image that looks like it has a lot more dynamic range than it really has. Then a lot of the same stuff with this image. This is actually a lot more crazy with all the detail I did. I really just won't go in depth as much just because it'll take forever, and it's basically all the same stuff. Kodak Rec 709 at 40% roughly. Then, wow, yeah, a lot of the same stuff here, guys. You'll see shape masks everywhere. So you'll see them here, here, here. This is just this general arch here. I wanted to bring out more of the shadows to see more detail without making it too noisy, and also without making it fake. So you can see, you can definitely see this here. Some of you might actually like it better without all this detail drawn out, but I don't know, I decided to go with it anyway. Similar stuff here, just kind of personal preference. I guess looking through it now, I don't really know why that was necessary, but that's what I did. And then the other things are just minor little adjustments to specific color and highlights. It's kind of hard for this one. But yeah, that's basically it, guys. If you have any more questions or comments, just anything, definitely feel free to let me know. I should be releasing some type of behind the scenes video with what we did while we were actually filming this. It won't be super fancy because we really weren't filming each other while we were filming for this video. But definitely thanks for watching. I hope you guys like it. Once again, I'm no expert at any of this stuff. A lot of it's just kind of playing around and finding your own style and what stuff you think looks good and tells, if you're doing narratives, just telling the best story. And it all really just comes back to that. This was just kind of vacation stuff and just showing off Kauai and the beauty that it has. So I really wanted to make that as best as possible. And I really wanted it in 4K. So believe it or not, you can do it with a MacBook and no upgrades, and you can just shoot with a proxy. You don't need all this crazy stuff. So anyway, I'll let you guys go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Future videos to come. Thanks, and goodbye.